And welcome to Ridgecrest Talk, your host Paul Vander. Tonight we're talking with one of my more unusual couple of guests with snake hunters, Danny. I'm going to forget your names. I'm not looking at my notes. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Danny Mackey.
I'm Derek Mackey.
Okay, Danny and Derek Mackey, and you guys are kind of the ones starting up snake hunters with some of the other people in the community. Why don't you just tell us real briefly in a nutshell, what is the snake hunters' goals?
The Ridgecrest Snake Hunters was founded by Renee Chappie a few years ago. We joined her about 6 months ago, and our goal is to educate the community and eliminate fear and misunderstanding of reptiles. So that's our basic goal.
And I think even though I've grown up in the valley and been around, I was chasing lizards when I was a kid, I think have a healthy respect that if I don't know the animal, I don't want to be around it. It's just better safe than sorry. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because we kind of have a combination. Like most places, we have native species, but we also have introduced species or pets, tropical species, different things that come on board. Typically, when you're educating, what do you see people like? Do they like the combination of both, or do they really like the natives? Or
it really seems to depend on the crowd. When I'm doing a classroom education, our fair booth, actually our arachnids and creepy crawlies were what was exciting and cool. The cockroaches, the scorpions, the tarantulas, that was really exciting with kids. When I'm at the schools, the snakes seem to be a really big hit. When parents are involved and there's that fear that's already there instilled in the parent and kind of goes off to the kids, they're a little more standoffish, so you get a lot more involvement with them when parents aren't involved.
So you're actually seeing the kids are really curious and asking more questions. And
oh yeah.
And I first saw you guys out at the fair. I thought it was one of the more interesting exhibits and presentations, that it was interactive, that you could ask questions of a lot of variety of different creatures. And it was funny because I remember the tarantula was kind of the one that was capturing everybody's attention. Yep. And I was thinking to myself, I've never seen a tarantula. Yeah. And then the very next week I was driving on a remote road, and I can't remember, I think it was in Tehachapi or somewhere, and a large tarantula was just walking right across the street. I was in a hurry, and I was thinking, if I were to try to catch that tarantula, well, I'm not going to try it because I don't have enough time. But is it safe or is it not safe? That was the first question that I think people ask. What are the species here in Ridgecrest, the native species, that people need to recognize are not safe, or that what are the precautions they need to take?
Personally, I don't consider anything not safe. Most people that are bitten by something venomous, mildly venomous, typically are bitten because they either are trying to inflict harm to the animal or they startle it. So they pretty much just want to get away from you. We have the sidewinder, the Panamint, Mojave rattlesnake. There's also speckled rattlesnakes, not necessarily here, but those are all venomous. They're pit vipers or rattlesnakes. They do just want to get away from you, so if you maintain a healthy distance from them, just let them go on their way.
Now, the Mojave rattlesnake, I remember years ago they used to say there was a Mojave red and a Mojave green. Are those different, or are those actually the same species? What are they saying now?
That's just a beer.
That's just the beer.
That's just the beer. The Mojave it's one classified snake. They do come in a variety of colors. However, they're not classified by color. It's just the Mojave rattlesnake.
Right, and I think that's what I had read, is that growing up, my experience was probably 1975, and all I recall is the guy with the cowboy hat, which I think was Mr. Robertson, who was probably teaching at Monroe. But back in the day, we used to have these old buildings at Murray, we called the Murray Annex. And we would show up for summer school, and it was like, we were so excited to be in there, and I don't know why. I think the kids just create an excitement. It must be the same way with the animals now. We just wanted to get in there, and the whole time I was in there, I was just taking notes after notes after notes about every type of reptile and creature possible. And I just thought, it was interesting and it was cool because we got to handle the animals and see the animals. But at the same time, that's a lot of work.
It is.
And I think that kind of set the standard. And one of the questions I thought the first thing that kind of came to mind was, I remember back then that they had a rattlesnake program where they could milk the venom, create an antivenom, and it kind of helped the community because we were involved with that, and then if we needed the antivenom, it was going to be readily available. Do they do that out here in the desert now?
There is no rattlesnake roundup for the antivenoms that I'm aware of in California. Over the course of the years, they have discovered different additives for antivenom to kind of make it more universal.
They take
they
take the venom from the snake and inject it into a horse. The horse has a natural immunity to most snakes, so the blood from the horse will create the antibodies to fight the venom.
And then they're able to use that
Yes.
antivenom. Kind of sounds a little bit like Ebola. Once somebody's had that virus, then I was just hearing one story that they said the dad had already had Ebola, so he was able to be around his son because he was now had the immunities for that, and he didn't have to worry about it. And so in that sense, the way that medicine has improved, obviously they're not going to be doing things 50 years ago the same way that they're doing them today.
Yeah, and they're even finding with a lot of our venomous native reptiles in the U.S. that their venoms can actually be used for good to be treatment for other things. The Gila monster, which is a native venomous lizard to Arizona, is being worked with right now to treat type 1 diabetes, to actually cure it. That's a lizard that only eats about 2 times a year, and the way they metabolize their food, they think that they can cure diabetes with it. So there's really neat things with every type of animal in the world. So
now, one of the things I do at home is I garden, and I have the red wiggler worm, which is one of the composting worms, and you have people who really think that's wonderful and terrific, but the last thing they want to do is touch it. It's like, no, I'm not touching the worm. And I guess, you know, with the different snakes and lizards and arachnids, the same thing. You have some people that really are hands-on, and other people that are like, it's really interesting. I just want to stand back a few feet and look from that. Now, besides the arachnids or the spiders, are there any other creatures, the smaller creatures, that you're also including, like insects and things like that, or not too much?
Including for?
As far as with the education, are you?
We do. We have, we've got snakes. We've got a few different lizards in our education collection. We have scorpion, tarantulas, and we personally have just about every type of bug that you'd see as a feeder around us on a regular basis as well.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and go to break. This is Paul Vander with the Snake Hunters on Ridgecrest Talk, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul Vander. We're talking with the Snake Hunters, a local group that's just recently formed. A couple with all kinds of creatures today, Danny and Derek Mackey. And we've been talking a little bit about some of the native species, and here you actually have a couple snakes. And why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Alrighty. These are both rosy boas. This guy here, our lighter color of the two, is something native to California. This is a coastal rosy boa, and this dark one here, kind of a chocolate brown color, is actually native to Mexico. It's from the Belize area. And talking with Paul here earlier, they developed these colors, what we call in the snake world a locality, based on whatever genetic abnormality is going to make them survive in the wild. So this guy here, he's a coastal rosy, so he's found by waters and streams and whatnot in our area, California area. So there's mosses and stuff for him to blend into. This guy being from Mexico, real dry, lots of rocks, and they're all living outcroppings, but he's going to blend in better with the rocks and the sand.
So if you have two rosy boas that are generally from different areas, one from Mexico, one from California, are they able to breed?
They are. It's in the snake world. It's not recommended. Your hobbyists and breeders, they all try to stick with pure localities. There are people that will breed them, but that's just creating another pet store quality animal, whereas there's many animals that need homes. So
now the rosy boas, you wouldn't find those typically out in the desert here unless they were released.
you actually do find these in the desert here. You don't
really?
find this particular one, but you do find one that's similar color to this, real clean lines, found all through the outcroppings in our hills. This is one of only 2 boas native to the U.S., and they're only found in Arizona and Southern California. So they've got a very small homeland. So, but you do find them out here. They take a drive, look through outcroppings, and you might get that rare chance to see one.
Now, I think it was as recent as 2 weeks ago. I was out in my garden, and it looked like to me an adolescent red racer going through the garden. And typically, as we get into our freezing temperatures, they're going to go into the holes for the winter, right?
Correct. They're getting ready for what is called burmation. It's similar to hibernation. However, snakes still have some activity during wintertime. They will still make an appearance for water if the temperatures are not too cold. Whereas a mammal that actually hibernates is truly asleep, doesn't do anything for the entire duration of winter.
And when will they typically come out? Like March,
springtime,
April, whenever it gets warm?
You can see them as early as February. Just it depends on the weather. Breeding season for most of the snakes is April through July. So they're starting to wake up. They're getting their first meals in March, getting all ready to repopulate their area with a new generation. So
Right, and I think it was 2 years ago, I saw maybe 5 different gopher snakes out in the wild within 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously they just came out, and that was, remember it was during the youth basketball towards the end, so it must have been March. And we got a big guy over here who I certainly hope is not a native lizard, a little bit bigger than the desert iguana that I'm used to seeing. What's this guy over here?
he's actually a tegu. He's still just a little guy.
And he's related to a monitor lizard?
He is, he is.
And how big would he get if he was full grown and eating healthy?
Depending on gender, how it's been taken care of, I believe these lizards get between 5 and 8 foot. They're an extremely heavy lizard. Somebody else I've worked with the educational stuff has one that weighs between 40 and 50 pounds, so they get quite large.
Wow, that guy's something else. Now, as far as we're talking about rescue and relocation, so if someone to have a pet like this, and all of a sudden they found they were in a situation that they weren't going to be able to continue to take care of that, that's one of the things that you guys do, right?
It's one of the things we do. We offer rescue for just about anything. If for some reason you can't take care of it, there's, I believe, 4 of us in our group that have space available and will always take an animal that can no longer be cared for, is no longer wanted. There's many reasons for rescue. It's not just neglect. So that's how we end up with things like this.
Yeah, I know the first thing I would do if for some reason that guy was in my house was I'd be reading up trying to figure out how do I give this habitat for this type of creature, because every creature is a little bit different.
Yeah,
how they eat
and
how warm they are, how much sunlight they need, all those types of things. And so whatever the reason is, there's no reason for people to get rid of an exotic pet in an unsafe way. There's always people locally to take that in.
Typically with somebody that's willing to rescue, they aren't going to be buying the animal from you, but if you're not able to rehome your animal, releasing him is never an option. You release him out here in the desert and he would not survive here. And in fact, even your native snakes, if they've been acquired through the wild and have been captive for a period, will actually typically die as well if released into their natural habitat. Your native animals are used to dinner being served on a plate, so they lose that desire to hunt.
Right, but if I come out in the yard and I see a native creature, like maybe some sort of a snake that I'm not sure what it is, that's something that you can come and take a look at.
Yep.
And you might decide not really to home it, but it just needs to be relocated.
Just relocate, yeah.
And that's something that you guys do also.
Yes, yes. Native species, granted that they're not injured, will just be relocated away from populated areas. If something is injured, we have taken home, rehabilitated it, and correlated with Department of Fish and Wildlife for release of native species. So.
Right, and so at least in the pet market, you can't just go out and catch lizards and sell those,
no,
right?
you
Because they're out in the wild.
cannot.
We want to keep those in the wild.
Correct, correct.
And so there needs to be a paper trail, and you know, if
Correct.
the pets are being bred in outside of nature, then there's a chance that they may be in the pet market. But otherwise, people just can't.
You find many of even the California native species in the pet trade. You can actually acquire our desert iguanas, captive bred. Rosy boas are another really popular one. King snakes. Those are all animals that are our native species and can be acquired through the pet trade, but have been
All right.
captive
Well,
bred.
I think everyone's going to want to get involved with that. But let's go ahead and go to break. Ridgecrest Talk. We'll be right back.
Soul brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now.
And welcome back, Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul Vander, and you notice I'm the one without any creatures in my hands. So I'm feeling just comfortable over here on the side. I'm here with Ridgecrest snake hunters, Danny and Derek Mackey, and we've brought out a new guest here. It's a snake of some sort, a little bit bigger than I feel comfortable handling. Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of species is this?
This is a red-tailed boa, native to South America. This is a designer snake. Through selective breeding, people have made different designers. The pink that runs through it kind of gives it away. Localities are kind of hard to come by anymore in the pet trade. This is the most snake. This is the most given up snake to rescues, just for the main fact is the size and availability.
So you're actually more likely to be called out to rescue a large boa than you are to have it be a native.
Large boa, large lizard.
Throughout the United States,
not only
yes.
are they extremely large, they have extremely large litters. A full-grown adult female can have, I believe it's 80 to 150 babies.
Wow.
Is that right?
80 to 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see when I was in Florida how they're having some problems with different species that have gotten out in the wild.
That's kind of blown up to quite a bit by media. Yeah, there are some non-native invasive species out in Florida, but they're not nearly the problem that the media makes them out to be.
Right.
The entire season was shot. The entire season of a show was shot chasing down snakes, and I watched the season, and during that time they caught a total number of 14 snakes. And they were trying to say that there's 200,000 of these snakes running around in Florida. And it took a full year for them to catch 14 snakes. I don't think the problem's there.
And one of the things I always talk when we're talking outdoors is that whichever group is talking always has a desire to be sustainable and responsible and concerned about the environment, because they want to continue to support whatever it is that they're interested in. So for example, for the snakes, the last thing you want to do is be irresponsible. Is you want to educate people and let them know the right way to handle them, the right way to take care of them, and so forth. And let's talk a little bit more about people that want to get educated about snake hunters. I first heard about you guys. My kids came home and said, hey, they're having this group meeting down at the Leroy Jackson Park.
Mm-hmm.
Can I go? And so why don't you tell us a little bit about how do you guys meet and how do people get involved with snake hunters?
You can find us on Facebook. Look us up at Ridgecrest Snake Hunters Education and Conservation. I've got monitor walking around. You can also reach us by email if you're somebody that does not have Facebook. It's Ridgecrest Snake Hunters at gmail.com. And we are also, we just purchased the local pet store here on Panamint, and we've got information in there as well. We typically meet once a month. We didn't meet this last month, but now that we have access to an indoor location, we may start picking back up and continue through the summer with our once a month gathering.
So really, people can get on Facebook, they can email you. Word of mouth, obviously, in a small town.
Yep.
I think I could probably talk to 3 people, and at least one of them's probably going to give me a lead on how to get a hold of you guys. And that's really, I think, is something that makes Ridgecrest unique. And we have this Petroglyph Festival coming up, and they say, oh, that's one of the unique 10 festivals to go to.
Yep.
And I would say that you guys would have to be one of the unique clubs that the community could get involved with. Now, are you getting a lot of adult interest as well, or is it mostly kids, or a combination?
We get a lot of looky-loos, especially with our group. We do have about 338 members. Out of those 338 members, we have about 15 that are very active with the group. But when it comes to the park setting, the fair setting, it's very much so kids that you're seeing. You'll have parents standing on the sideline. You'll have some that'll come and they want to touch everything. So it's kind of a 50-50 with the adults, but the kids generally, if there's no fear instilled in them, they're typically it's about 100% participation with hands-on questions, etc. So.
Right. Now, kids obviously are curious. They're not going to have an expectation that they need to be experienced. But can adults come and get involved even though they don't have any experience?
Of course, of course.
So it's probably mostly attitude, and then from there they can get educated
Yep.
and then share
Yep.
that knowledge with
our,
the kids.
Our goal is education, and any age can learn. So.
Right. And I think another thing that's kind of interesting is there's a lot of these groups that we have different types of rescue, bee rescue, exotic animal rescue. I even talked about plant rescue. If somebody has some plants that they don't want, why would we throw them out instead of rehoming them and finding a new place for them? And maybe in our future we can start working more together. As I know some people say, if you call the local exterminator company and say, hey, I need to get these bees killed, they're going to say, wait a minute, why don't you call this person who can rescue your bees if it's possible?
Yeah.
And then that way we're not losing
especially
those
the value of every animal. Without bees, we don't exist. So.
Yeah, and like you said, one of these animals might be involved with a cure for diabetes or for some other thing that we just need to learn more about that. It sounds really exciting. If there's something we haven't talked about, what would be the thing that you want our viewers to learn about as far as what we're doing?
The biggest thing I come across is everybody that's always been scared of snakes has always told me the only good snake is a dead snake. The number one reason for a massive heart attack survivor these days is actually from a pygmy rattlesnake. Take a moment to reflect on that. If you have a loved one that's had a massive heart attack, it was probably saved by a snake that you're willing to kill.
Huh. Okay, so I'm looking through on your card. You have this neat little card that kind of tells everything, including husbandry, education, and conservation. That really wraps up what we're talking about. And yeah, I think it always, once we start to get around somebody who knows more than we do, we realize that some of our perceptions and our fears are overblown, and it's really not that bad. And we're here, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight.
Not a problem.
Danny and Derek Mackey with the Ridgecrest Snake Hunters, and we got Facebook. What was the email address?
Facebook, Ridgecrest Snake Hunters at gmail.com.
Ridgecrest Snake Hunters at gmail.com. So Ridgecrest may be the snake hunter capital of the area here. Not too long. If this group is only at 300 members, it may be up to 3,000 before we know it. So thank you so much for coming on. This is Paul Vander with Ridgecrest Talk. Have a wonderful evening.